All right. What's going on, man? It's Cash from Cash Media back at it again. I know it's been a while, but uh, things happen. But I'm back at it. Um, we here to talk a lot more football because you already know football is coming back up. NFL preseason is back underway. Players are back in training camp. And there's a lot to talk about, to be honest, when it comes to the NFL and what to expect with this upcoming season, right? I know y'all seen the title, and y'all know what's going on. If y'all been keeping up, Shedeur Sanders and the Cleveland Browns. I'm gonna start with this, right? So I have my opinions with the Shedeur Sanders situation. I've been following Shedeur Sanders since his Colorado days, or really since the Jackson State days when Deion Sanders was coaching at Jackson State, then transferred to Colorado, like most people. And I had a pretty high opinion, of Shedeur Sanders. I thought he was a pretty somewhat elite quarterback, skill-wise. From my assessment, I thought he was a pretty good quarterback. I thought he was very composed within the pocket. I thought that he was very accurate despite the pressure and the QB pressures that he sustained from his college years. Both years, actually, because, both years he had somewhat of a subpar O-line at Colorado. Colorado is just not known for, being a premier team or being, on the upper echelon of college football teams, right? Like, if you guys been keeping up with college football, I mean, you guys would already know that. So I even have my mic on. So with Shedeur being drafted later in the rounds, I personally had Shedeur Sanders drafted by my New York Giants. But as we all well know, Shedeur Sanders was not drafted in the first round. He wasn't drafted in the second round. He wasn't drafted in the third round. He wasn't drafted in the fourth round. This man was drafted in the fifth round, and they violated Shedeur, right? And whether he deserved to be drafted in the fifth round, whether he should have been drafted in the first round or earlier, right? I mean, that's subject for interpretation, right? So, but my assessment is that I thought the New York Giants should have drafted Shedeur. I think we should have drafted Shedeur. I think Shedeur Sanders being on a New York stage, right, playing quarterback for the New York Giants, being the son of Deion Sanders, I thought the stage was set up for Shedeur. You know what I mean? I thought everything lined up. And New York Giants are one of those teams where, I felt like they should have taken a different approach at the quarterback position, right? I mean, we all well know we had Eli Manning for a good amount of time, and then Daniel Jones, right, was supposed to be the new guy up and coming, taking the mantles of Eli Manning, right? So Danny Jones, he went through the Manning quarterback camp. The Mannings had spoken very highly of Daniel Jones, but he went to Duke, so there wasn't really a big or a lot of assessment of Daniel Jones coming out of college, despite any scouts that were really looking at him. Like, nobody's really looking at the Duke football team, right? It's like Duke is not known for their football team. They're famously known for their basketball team, right? But lo and behold, we drafted Daniel Jones, and as you all well know, he's not with us anymore, right? Because he went from Daniel Jones to Danny Doodle, right? He just wasn't fitting the script. He was a turnover machine. Do I think that he's the worst quarterback? Maybe not. I mean, but he's still not there, and he's not good enough to be on our team. I think the production of Daniel Jones played somewhat into Saquon Barkley leaving, although there were a lot of other factors and a lot of things that played into it that basically forced Saquon Barkley to leave in the first place. But going back to the Shedeur Sanders situation, right? So Obviously, Shedeur Sanders and the New York Giants were the third overall pick in the first draft, and you could have taken anybody, but we decided to take a defensive player, and I was fine with that. You typically want to approach the NFL draft situation. Well, I like to approach it in the sense of try to get the best player, you know, around your pick, right? But if you need a certain position, if you need a certain player, then go at it, right? So, given my personal assessment of Shedeur Sanders, I felt like, the system that we had would have benefited Shedeur Sanders and vice versa, right? But that doesn't seem to be the case. But lo and behold, let's skip to present day because this is actually what I want to talk about, right? So, as you all well know, or if you don't know, the Cleveland Browns have 4 QBs on their depth chart, right? So there's still Deshaun Watson, Joe Flacco, Dylan Gabriel, and then now Shedeur Sanders. So Shedeur Sanders, if you guys have not heard, Shedeur Sanders was listed as the 4th string quarterback for the Cleveland Browns, right? So the speculation is that Joe Flacco will be the starting quarterback going into week 1. And then I believe Deshaun Watson was possibly number 2. Dylan Gabriel was number 3. And Shedeur Sanders was number 4. Right. So Shedeur Sanders and the Cleveland Browns are playing against the Carolina Panthers today at 4 o'clock Western time, Pacific time. Right. So we're going to have like a good assessment. We're going to be able to, really look at Shedeur in the most basic sense. Right. We're going to get, somewhat real game footage of Shedeur Sanders at the professional level, but it is still preseason. There's nothing to, bloviate about or nothing to take over in terms of, can you really assess him at this level? But to a certain extent, we will be able to look at Shedeur Sanders playing today and have somewhat of an observation of how he's going to be playing. Because we've been hearing a lot of things when it comes to Shedeur Sanders, right? Like he hasn't gotten first team reps, but a lot of teammates around him have been speaking up about him, alluding to the fact that he's a great teammate and that they support him. But a lot of that's kind of expected. It could be a little bit biased. Some may take it as biased. But I don't see it that way, right? Because the Cleveland Browns and the teammates of Shedeur Sanders are the only ones that's really seen him play up close, on the day-to-day, right? So, and for us as fans and avid watchers, we're going to see what he's been like today, right? Going against the Carolina Panthers. So, I mean, I'm in that boat. I'm in that same boat. Whereas I think that Shedeur Sanders is being scapegoated. I think he's being used as leverage towards his father. And this is known, this isn't really a new thing that's been going on, right? Like we've even heard the Cleveland Browns owner come out and basically say that he wouldn't have drafted Shedeur Sanders. There were numerous reports from the Athletics stating that there were NFL owners that came out and went to their front office and stated and adamantly stated that they do not want to draft Shedeur Sanders. So I don't understand. I mean, there are things to understand, but I don't see how, for somebody who has the name and cachet like Shedeur Sanders, why they would want to avert away from that. Now, is it the glamour? Is it the outspokenness? Is it the fervor? Is it the swagger? Like, I don't know. But it seems to be a lot of hating around, Shedeur Sanders, which is extremely weird in my opinion. But I have nothing but support for Shedeur Sanders. I think he's going to be a great QB in the NFL. Some people may disagree with that, but that's your opinion, right? So I think Shedeur Sanders is going to, take up the mantle of an NFL or as an NFL QB. My bad. But I don't think it's going to be with the Browns though. Because the Browns are just one of those franchises where, as a quarterback, if you don't have that proper support system, if you don't have, the backing of your own team and office, not the team, not his teammates, because we don't know, we don't really know how they feel about him. We just know by what they say, which for the most part has been positive. But I just don't see how the Cleveland Browns franchise, which is famously known for, you know, you know, dropping the ball on QBs. I mean, you see what's going on with Baker Mayfield, right? There were always headlines as it pertains to what's going on with Baker Mayfield and whether he was becoming a bust and whether it was going to work out, and the situation with Baker Mayfield and Odell Beckham Jr. It was just a lot of nonsense going on, right? And we all know the Cleveland Browns have been looking for a QB really since Otto Grant, right? Since the Jim Brown days, right? So the Cleveland Browns are not one of those places where you want to develop a quarterback. That's one of the last places you want to be if you're trying to develop your skills as an NFL quarterback. All right, so I'm gonna leave it at that. We're gonna talk about that a little bit later on in the week because, like I said, the game is happening today. So Cleveland Browns versus the Carolina Panthers today. So we're going to see Shedeur Sanders hit the field at the professional level for the first time, right? So I'm gonna hit on another subject. So the Bengals played today against the Philadelphia Eagles, Super Bowl champions from last year, right? So Joe Burrow had somewhat of a very productive day into his standards, right? He threw for 123 yards and had 2 touchdowns on the day, and then one of them was also to the last year's Triple Crown receiver Jamar Chase, who is getting the bag, right? So why do I bring up the Bengals? The situation with the Bengals is a very awkward situation, right? Because I was just looking around for some stats and I noticed that the Cincinnati Bengals are famously known for having one of, if not the worst record in the NFL when it comes to the month of September, right? So the Bengals are 1-11 in September, right? And this is a huge problem for the Bengals, right? So, alluding to today's game, the Bengals lost to the Eagles, although it is a preseason game, so there's nothing to really dig too deep on when it comes to how the wins and losses, because the starters weren't playing for the entirety of the game. But Joe Burrow was just kind of pushing aside his own individual performance, although he did have a good game for the time that he was in. I think that he's taking a very professional approach when it comes to, looking at it from the long-term perspective, right? So reason why I had to start with this statistic of the Bengals starting out 1-11 in the month of September is because the Bengals this year cannot afford to have that sort of start again, right? I have been famously known to say that the AFC North is the hardest division in football. I mean, if you're starting out 1-11, think about it. You're the Cincinnati Bengals. We just talked about the Cleveland Browns, right, and what they seek to accomplish and what they seek to do, because I'm pretty sure, and not to mention the Cleveland Browns are one of those teams that has the Cincinnati Bengals' number, right? Like the Cincinnati Bengals they don't just run amok over the Cleveland Browns. It's a divisional game, right? And that's just the Browns. That's not factoring in for the Baltimore Ravens, which is a team that's seeking to be Super Bowl champions and are Super Bowl contenders. And you have the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, obviously, that's a separate situation. That's a separate narrative on its own. We all know that Aaron Rodgers is the first year of Aaron Rodgers being on the Pittsburgh Steelers. We know that DK Metcalf also signed an extension or signed a new contract with the Pittsburgh Steelers, right? So there's going to be a lot to take away from the AFC North this year. I adamantly believe that the Baltimore Ravens more than likely are going to win this division, which is just going to make it all the more difficult for that division. So if I already have the Baltimore Ravens taking the AFC North, then who's going to be 2 and 3, right? So it could be between the Bengals and the Steelers. And if you're a betting man, more than likely you're probably going to choose the Cincinnati Bengals, but that's not a sure thing. And reason being is because they didn't make it to the playoffs last year, right? And due to the way they started last year, it put them deep into the hole where it was almost damn near impossible to scratch into the playoff. They needed so many scenarios to occur to fall in line just so that they can squeeze through. And it just wasn't enough, right? And the AFC conference is one of those conferences where it's more difficult, in my opinion, than the NFC. Right now, when you're talking about, you're already considering the Chiefs, which is in a different division, but in the same conference. Then you got to factor in the Bills, you got to factor in the Ravens, you got to factor in who else? I mean, we could add the Steelers. Who else? I'm missing a team. I feel like there's more. One second. Even to an extent, you have the Chargers. Chargers with Jim Harbaugh. They're not a bad team. Who else? The Texans, right? Possibly. I'm not. Can't count them out. Even the Broncos, right? The Broncos made it to the playoffs. And I would keep it at that so far. I mean, it's a hit or miss. But I was just throwing out some teams at the top of my head. All right, so we all know, the AFC is known for having the best quarterbacks in the NFL, right? Just consider the top 3, top 4 quarterbacks, and all of them are in the AFC, right? And there's kind of like this debate whether Lamar Jackson is better than Joe Burrow, or there's I think it becomes a tougher argument. And then considering the fact that if you compare Lamar Jackson's stats, well, not stats, his accomplishments, his record against the Cincinnati Bengals, and just how far he's been in the playoffs, or how many times he's been in the playoffs, compared to Joe Burrow. Even though Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals did make it to the playoffs, not the playoffs, the Super Bowl in his second year, it just wasn't enough to kind of, they weren't able to go back, right? So the thing about it is with the Bengals is, can they win? Can they actually win the AFC North? Can they get over the hump and start off the season on a better note, with a little bit more fire, get the ball rolling early, because I think that's going to be extremely important, right? So you know what? Let's even do this. I'm gonna do this right now. Yeah, I'm gonna tap into. Let's see. I'm gonna bring up their regular season. So. Okay. I got it right here. So the first game will be the Browns, right? So they're going to be in Cleveland for that first game. Then they're going to go against the Jaguars, Vikings, Broncos, Lions, Packers, Steelers, Jets. And so those games, those are the first 2 months of the football season. So first game that they're going to be going against is the Cleveland Browns, which they could take that game, right? But it depends on how the Cincinnati Bengals defense is going to perform, and we kind of understand what's going on with the Cincinnati Bengals roster, and how the owner likes to conduct themselves and how he pays players, right? And even with the situation with Trey Henderson, right? So even though a betting man would say that the Cincinnati Bengals are the favorite in that game, who's to say, right? But I think that the Jaguars, they could take the Jaguars for sure. They could take the Browns, so they could start off 2-0. Vikings, right? That's a team that you can't really overlook, and even though that they moved on from what's it called? What's his name? He's with the Seahawks now. I can't believe I forgot his name. But you guys know. um, but now the Vikings are going to be starting JJ McCarthy, who was injured, and last year was his rookie year, right? And then so Broncos can't overlook them. Lions can't overlook them. Packers can't overlook them. Steelers. So that in and of itself is a tough stretch of games. The first two games, okay, they might start off 2-0, but then you got those next 1, 2, 3, those next 4 games, right? Those are tough games, right? Broncos made the playoffs last year. Vikings made the playoffs last year. Lions made the playoffs last year. Packers, Steelers. Those are all playoff teams. So if they don't get the ball rolling this time around, if they don't start off strong this time around, I don't see how they can make the same recovery that they did 2 years ago. And if they don't, they can fall into the same scenario they did last year, right? So now let's move on to something else, right? So let's move on to the Los Angeles Rams, right? Los Angeles Rams, I think, is a very, very interesting team, right? So the Rams, they had quite the pickup, I think they had a good free agency this year. They signed Devontae Adams, they signed Kyron Williams, right? And so the Rams are just one of those teams that they have a good defense, right? So everybody kind of thought that with Aaron Donald retiring, that there was going to be somewhat of a downfall, I guess, on the defensive end. But that doesn't seem to be the case. I think the biggest issue right now with the Rams is Matthew Stafford. And not due to his ability, but more so because of the fact that he has to stay healthy, right? Matthew Stafford is just one of those quarterbacks he's just been hit with a plague of injuries throughout his career, right? So right now, Matthew Stafford has a back injury and he's listed as week to week. So who's to say, how he's going to be when week 1 comes up? But I have confidence that Matthew Stafford is more likely going to be playing by week 1. So I'm going to make that assumption. I'm going to proceed as follows, right? But the LA Rams, right? They're in somewhat of an interesting division, not the toughest division, but moderately difficult, I may say, because you can't necessarily overlook the Arizona Cardinals. They can be a sneaky team. I believe they go against. Let's see. Let me see. Okay, I'm pulling it up right now. Okay, and then so first game is the Texans. Well, actually, no. I was looking at the divisions. I am tripping. I did not mean to pull up their schedule. So they go against Seahawks, Niners, Cardinals. Seahawks, Niners, Cardinals. So, all right. So, Seahawks, Cardinals, Niners. Now, we don't know how the Niners are going to be performing this year due to the fact that, they basically dismantled their defense and have a whole new approach, a whole new look. Christian McCaffrey, he was out for the entirety of the year, and so we don't know how he's going to be coming back, but I have no doubt that he'll still be able to perform. But it's almost the same situation with Matthew Stafford, right? Staying healthy. It's always the same case, especially when it comes to the NFL, right? But, with Matthew Stafford, with him being healthy and having the weapons that he has, I don't see how the Los Angeles Rams can't be productive, how they can't make something happen this year. I think they're an extremely dangerous team, right? I think with the emergence of Puka Nacua and then potentially having the mentorship in the leadership of Devontae Adams on the other side of the field, Matthew Stafford doesn't just have to throw to one guy. He can throw to numerous guys, all right? And then they still have Higbee, right? Matthew Stafford does utilize his tight end. So Matthew Stafford has the weapons, right? And given the fact that the Rams just signed up Kyron Williams, we know that Sean McVay loves to run the football. He loves to run the play action, right? So the Rams are one of those teams that can creep up on you. I would say between the Rams, Bucks, who else? Who else? Who else? Who else? I mean, you could kind of say the Lions. I want to say the Lions because they normally win. I think they're going to win the division. I would more so say that the Packers, right, because they're a young team. They could pop off at any moment, and I believe they made the playoff 2 straight years. With Jordan Love taking the field as the starting quarterback first year 2 years ago, right? Last year he wasn't as good. You could say that he wasn't as good as the previous year, but I think it's subjective. I think people would honestly say that Jordan Love didn't play as well in the second half of last year as he did the year before that, right? So the Rams, you know what? Let's tap into that schedule again. Let's tap into that schedule again, because I don't think their schedule is all more difficult. I mean, Texans is a difficult team defensively, and has a lot of upside offensively. And given the fact that CJ Stroud, he didn't have the best. His rookie year was obviously better than his sophomore year, but I don't think that's necessarily going to be a continuing thing. Like, I don't think it's going to be a downtrend of, how he's going to be performing moving forward. But just within those first couple of games, you got Texans, Titans, Eagles, right? So you could easily be 1-2. And then you got Colts, Niners, Ravens, Jaguars, Saints, Niners, Seahawks, Bucks, Panthers, Cardinals, Lions, Seahawks, Falcons, Cardinals. All right, so I could see like maybe a 10-7, 11-6, right, for the Los Angeles Rams. But due to the makeup of their roster and what they could potentially look like at their full potential, I think the Los Angeles Rams are going to be above 500. Right, so it's going to be an interesting season, right? It's going to be an interesting football season. We're just now starting to really get the ball rolling and starting to see, how things are going to unfold. But I'm extremely excited for the upcoming NFL season, right? So once again, Cash from Cash Media. Hope you guys stick around for the next video. Like and subscribe if you guys want more. And I can't wait to see you guys again in the near future. Peace. Have a good one.